The top Afghan government officials, including the president, have now fled from the country. The Taliban have completed their takeover of Afghanistan, and at the receiving end of their atrocities are, of course, the women in Afghanistan. The Afghans very clearly remember the horrors of the Taliban reign between the years 1996 and 2001. However, in the recent statements that the Taliban has been making, the Taliban claims to have mellowed down and to have become much more moderate in its interpretation of how it would want to go about its Islamic Sharia law. Now, the Taliban has said that it respects women's rights. Taliban further claims that women will be allowed to leave their homes alone, and they'll also have access to education, and they'll also be allowed to work. But women will have to wear the hijab. The spokesperson for the insurgents has said that the policy on punishments will in fact depend on courts. However, contrary to Taliban's recent claims, women have of course started to face quite a few challenges already. Remember, the whipping and the stoning were common forms of Taliban punishment during the earlier regime. According to reports, women working at the Azizi Bank were pushed out by the Talibs, and they were asked to not return to the office for their work. A similar scene also played out at a branch of another Afghan bank, Bank Milli, in the western city of Herat. The Taliban fighters carrying guns entered into the branch and then admonished the female employees for showing their faces in public. Women there were forced to quit immediately. Now, the incident is, of course, an early sign of that is being looked at in terms of the rights that women will have, as the Taliban have now assumed control of the nation. The number of civilians killed in the armed conflict has also risen pretty sharply. With absurd diktats, the future of women in Afghanistan hangs in balance. As the Taliban has swiftly taken over Afghanistan, it is the Afghan women who are looking at a pretty grim future filled with uncertainty and fear. Nearly 250,000 Afghans have been forced to flee from their homes since the end of May. They all fear that the Taliban could again impose their brutal, strict and repressive interpretation of the Sharia, eliminating women's rights. This is what the Taliban have been doing despite the rights that are already given to women in Islam. Now, 80% of those who have been displaced at this point of time internally are women and children, joining millions who have had to flee from previous rounds of fighting and violence in recent decades.
دوره طالبانه که من خیلی طفل بودم، مادرم مرا برده بود آیس کریم خانه و مادرم به خاطر از اینکه به چند لحظه روی خود مادرم لچ کرده بود، طالبا به شلاق می زدن که خودت چرا روی لچ کردی. و او حس بیچارگی و او حس حقارت را که من در اون زمان داشتم، گرچه خیلی خرد بودم، طفل بودم، فراموش نمیکنم و امروز هم احساس میکنم اگر طالبان بیاید.
Well, the women have suffered in many different ways. Whenever the Taliban has been in charge, the Taliban forbids education for girls and also the right to work for women. Afghan women cannot travel outside of their home without being accompanied by a male relative. This ideology ended up hitting Afghan women the worst. They also carried out public executions, chopped off hands of thieves and also stoned women who were accused of adultery. The security of women is, of course, a huge concern. There is a sense of dread that is present, particularly amongst the Afghan women. And we also spoke with our correspondent, Mariam Wardak, who spoke to us about how a potential Taliban rule could impact the women in Afghanistan. Listen in.
Well, there has been a major change in regards to how the Taliban have decided to communicate with the public. If that is to have recognition with the international community is one thing, but yes, there have been reports that women have been let go from bank jobs in certain provinces, and women have been asked to go back to home versus from universities. So it's too soon, I think, for us to tell exactly, but yes, the fear and the uncertainty for the future is very strongly present right now in Afghanistan. However, you have to look at it in a holistic context. When you're looking at urban areas, the sheikh is very strong and prominent there. When you look at the rural areas, especially in areas where young girls did not have as much accessibility to education or to economic opportunities, there hasn't been much of a change. There is a strong sense of worry amongst the women. And they, especially now that the president has evacuated from Afghanistan with his core team, who will take the discussion forward in regards to how the women's structure will be in society. This is quite concerning for all of them. Again, we have to look at the whole culture. Afghanistan is a very tribal and conservative society. There have been many incidents within the past 20 years where they have oppressed and harmed women, even under the democratic government. For instance, there was the public killing of Farkhunda that was 1.5 miles outside of the presidential palace. How can this change, and what will happen for the future, and to make sure that there is a proper future for Afghan women? Because we have to look at it as the aspect that this is not as much as a patriarchal society anymore. There are matriarchs now due to what has happened in the past 60 years and how many men that have been gone from the families. There needs to be a strong theological conversation, argument to be held with the Taliban by the village elders, by Islamic scholars, and more so by female Islamic scholars. A call for all female Islamic scholars around the world is very necessary to come and stand with the Afghan women, to put pressure on the Afghan Taliban to allow them to have a standing place in society. And that standing place is access to education, because within access to opportunities within our religion, within the Islamic religion, there is a lot of opportunities for women. However, religion and culture have this war and battle within Afghanistan. Even when you can excel within religion, the culture works against you.
So that was Mariam Wardak there speaking about how the takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban will impact the life of women. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.